out. I'm on the road getting dough, guess I'm Homer now. Getting top, then this German got her humming loud. I got a call from the plug, said he's coming down. I'ma whip the weapon, bag it up, at least 100 count. Had to hustle and grind, but I lost it all. Kept it 100 stitch slip.
Hey, yo, what's good with everybody, man? I hope everybody's having a productive day, feeling a blessing like I always say. It's one life, one chance. We only got one chance to do this right. Let's get it done. With that being said, man, I received a lot of love and support based on me voicing my opinion about the Bozo situation. But like I said, it's my perspective, my opinion, how I felt, what I believe in. You know, everybody's entitled to their opinion. There was quite a few people in the comment section who kind of, you know what I mean, gave me some backlash, gave me some criticism, but you know what? I take it in stride. Trust me, I read all the comments in every video, do my best to respond. Obviously, I avoid the negative ones, but on the same token, you know, to me, I look at it like conversations in the comment section, man. We're all reading one another's comments. We're all gaining perspectives. Even the individuals that criticized me and spoke out against what I said, that were in disagreement, actually enlightened me in a lot of ways, more than you can imagine. So trust me, it's videos like that open up these kind of topics of discussion. That's how we become educated. I will say this, one of my subscribers watched one of my videos. I don't know what it was about, what it was pertaining to, but he was like, no Mexican rapper will ever be the next Lil Wayne or the next Gucci Man. Just know that. And then I was like, well, in my head, bro, do you think that's what we're trying to accomplish? Or we're just trying to utilizing this rap genre, this rap game, just to level up our people? Just so we can have music for our people, just so we can have a voice, just so we can create a fan base for ourselves and become successful in our own lane, in our own aspect. There ain't no Mexican rapper out here that's saying he's going to be better than Lil Wayne. Lil Wayne is Lil Wayne. He's going to be Lil Wayne. Nobody's going to ever be Lil Wayne. But I like where his standpoint was at, and I was going to get into it, but I was like, man, there's some topics that might just bring out some delicate issues, or I might say something and slip up. So that's all I got to say about that. It's like, bro, Mexican rappers just want to be Mexican rappers. We want to be just in the hip-hop for the sake of the art form, for our passion, and even if it is towards our raza, promoting our raza, it doesn't matter what a Mexican rapper does. You know, we're getting involved because we choose to, not because we want to be somebody else. So with that being said, hit that subscribe button, hit that like, always leave a comment. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Check the links in the description, and I appreciate you guys' support. One of my subscribers asked me a particular question. He asked me if when I was a norteño, was it funk on site with the Bulldogs, and will there ever be peace, or did we ever get along? A long history. But I can assure you this, through my time, the only time we caught Bulldogs slipping as norteños, when I was norteño, was on the streets. In prison, no, it's funk on site. I don't think there'll ever be a peace treaty. I don't think there will ever be a mutual agreement, a ceasefire. Even though I told a story about the New Flowers, and when they tried to try to create a ceasefire, infiltrating our COCs and our programs as norteños, and kind of shake things up a little bit. I think there's too much animosity, too much hate, but not from norteños, but from Bulldogs. But allow me to explain. I want you to look at it from this perspective. The NF branched off from the Mexican Mafia due to their oppressive ways, their bully tactics, their extortion, their taxation, what they were doing to the gente from up north, Northern California, the Chicanos, the Fameros, so on and so forth. You know, that kind of hate and resentment and kind of stance went for 5 and 6 decades, up until recently. That these individuals were willing to stay in indeterminate shoes in solitary confinement, where it's probably the worst psychological warfare that a man can go through. What they had to put up with, the lack of freedom, the physical and mental restraint from being on the main lines. They were sacrificing the only freedom that they had left, because they refused to get along with the other side. I'm pretty sure the Mexican Mafia, they hold grudges too. They don't forget about all their brothers that died in battle all those years, when the NF finally branched off and they were spearing each other on the tiers and they were taking each other out on the yards. Then all the Mexican Mafias that were still on the yards, you know, the birth of the ex-Avi Soldado, you know, the Nuestra Raza, they went out there and started plugging, you know, Mexican Mafia members. You know, that's a hard thing to forget. No matter if it's these new age, these new generation, this Pepsi generation Mexican Mafia members, and not the ones that, you know, were back in the day, you know, that's a hate that's always going to be embedded in you, and it's kind of hard to wash that off. And now you have this end of hostilities that was probably contrary and went against probably a lot of Familianos and a lot of Mexican Mafia members who didn't want to do it, but only agreed to the terms due to the fact that they were finally probably fed up. I think they realized that they couldn't beat the validation system. So they said, you know what, we got to reach a better term. So think about it. They went 5 or 6 decades with pure prejudice, bias, and hate. Just evil within. Hating one another, trying to take each other out the game, trying to be the bigger organization. And it came to the realization that we need to come together in agreement and put a ceasefire to this 6 or 7 decades of warfare and just genocide amongst our own kind, so we can go out there to the main lines and get access to these phones, get access to these dope, get access to more money, so we could be in control again. Because, you know, history does repeat itself, man. There's going to be a time again where there's going to be an uprising, more people branching out, more people breaking away. So I looked at it like the end of hostilities was their way to say, you know what, a lot of dropouts are happening. Something's going on these main lines that is not under our control. So let's go out there and let's regain control and regain our power. And then we have better access to phones to get things done. And you've seen all the recent operations that have been taking place from individuals who were locked up in the streets. You know, these individuals, they took another political stance. So they undermined everything that they went through, decades of what they went through, that struggle, that hardship, those punishments, those brothers that they lost in battle, to finally become free again, or at least regain some type of freedom that they hadn't had in years. But will that same peace treaty be extended to the Bulldogs? I don't believe so. I just wonder why it took so long for these powerful but arrogant men to put their pride to the side and say, you know what, this is going to be in the best interest for all our organizations. If this was done a long time ago, I'm pretty sure this peace treaty could have been further in its future. You know, they could have had a better establishment out here on the main lines and on the streets if that's what they really wanted to. But, you know, they were just so arrogant and egotistical that they'd rather sit in the cell and rot in hell than to say, you know what was in the past is in the past. Let's start fresh. Let's start a new chapter. Let's shake hands. And even then, with the incident that happened in Goshen, there's been a lot of speculation I've been hearing from active individuals who are on my Instagram who share this kind of information with me, are saying that it's not looking too good about the peace treaty just based on the fact what took place in Goshen, that Goshen incident that I've been talking about. See, in order to understand why there will be no peace treaty with the Norteños and the NF and the Bulldogs, is you got to understand the evolution of the Bulldogs and how it all took place. See, the thing about it is, when I believe I want to say it was in the early 70s, mid 70s, you know, the NF assigned the F-14 barrio that was in Fresno, California. They appointed that city as the NF regiment. And everybody knows that the big homie Crackers was responsible and assigned to that regiment. And he was working under he was the captain at the time, but he was working under the NF General Babo Sosa before Babo Sosa was impeached by the NF. And he was actually replaced. From what I read, if I can recall, it was like in 1974 or 77 is when it became first documented within the prison administration and gang task force in Fresno, California, of 2 individuals. I'm not saying they're the ones started it, but these were the first 2 documented F-14ers before F-14 became a big thing in Fresno. The individuals were named Frank Manuel Villagama and Carlos Barron Gonzalez. They were the first 2 documented in the prison administration to be F-14ers. Now, I'm not saying they were the ones who started it. Don't get that twisted. I'm not saying the ones who started it. So that's when their presence was really big in the streets of Fresno, California. That's when the NF assigned that to be the stronghold for their street regiment. And that's when Crackers became responsible for it. And he was, once Babo Sosa got impeached and he got replaced, Crackers started working under the general, Sammy Venegas. That's the only name. That's the only name that I could recall. But once Sammy replaced Babo Sosa, Sammy, for some reason, wrote a letter to his wife, Linda, and actually told Linda to tell Crackers that he needs to relinquish the NF Street Regiment and that he was going to replace Crackers with somebody else. Now, you can imagine, I don't know what was taking place around that time and why Crackers felt like, you know, he was getting stripped of his status and getting stripped of responsibility. Who knows? Maybe Crackers didn't want to give up that Street Regiment at the time. because of how that was one of the biggest street regimens that was generating a lot of revenue with, taxing drug dealers, selling drugs, prostitution, extortion, gambling, so on and so forth. And a lot of that money was supposed to be going to the NF banks per the NF Constitution. But the thing about it was a lot of F-14ers weren't kicking up. And then the Familianos started feeling like, they were getting burned for their money. Hence, the replacement of Crackers. So think about it. Crackers may have been doing his job. Crackers may have been sending some money to the NF banks wherever they were located. But for the simple fact that maybe he didn't meet a specific quota or didn't meet all the criteria, maybe he fulfilled a big portion of his job, but not all of it, because the streets are a little bit different. Controlling the streets is a little bit more difficult than in a prison cell riding a kite and somebody on the yard overlooking a bunch of people that won't undermine leadership. But I can understand how hard it is to control. I've seen Bubba try to control many barrios, and he wouldn't get all of them, but he'd get quite a few of them. But one man can't be in the whole city of Fresno at once. And you can't, and Crackers couldn't get the F-14 to control the whole city at once. Fresno's a big city. But while they were trying to replace Crackers, a lot of F-14ers began complaining, filing complaints, and started resisting, saying that, they were tired of the F-14ers, being extorted, being abused, being oppressed by the NF. But a lot of those complaints were just being swept under the rug. But their main concern was there was a lot of F-14ers at the time. Quite a few of them, I think 3 or 4 of them were actually NF members, and then the rest of them were NF associates that actually got unalived due to the fact that they weren't paying their taxes on time, or they were coming up short in their taxation. Now think about it. Do you think they have the right to actually be mad and feel oppressed when all these individuals in the prison system are telling one man, Crackers, hey man, collect all this money from all these dudes and they better pay up, or else they can lose their life. It's a death sentence. And only for them to actually see it firsthand that their brothers, their homies that they grew up, their homies from their body are losing their lives because of who they're working for. These individuals are starting to get greedy and starting to take over the streets of Fresno, saying that Fresno belongs to them, and then hurting one another and hurting all their members, unaliving some of their members because they didn't pay their taxes on time. Honestly, I think that's an appropriate grievance for any man. No man wants to see one of his best friends who grew up in his hood lose his life at the hands of a familiano or any other carnal that's locked up because they felt like they didn't get enough money or that they didn't pay in a timely fashion. And the thing about it is, Sammy Venegas, I don't even know if I'm saying that fool's last name right. Venegas, something like that. He had a little brother that was actually unalived in the streets of Fresno, along with 2 others, all 3 found at the same location in the outskirts for abusing the same circumstance, for not paying his taxes. And this is an individual who's responsible, who got assigned to replace Crackers. Imagine that. I'm not gonna sit here and say, the NF Sammy had a hand in getting his own brother removed, but how could you just stand there and watch your own organization take out your bloodline, your own brother that you grew up with since you were babies, all because of street taxation and a missed payment? I guess around like December 1977 and like 1979, the NF in the prison system decided to replace Sammy because they felt like Sammy wasn't fulfilling his job and wasn't getting Crackers under control. So obviously, him not fulfilling NF will, they actually try to deem Sammy with 2 occasions trying to hit Sammy. So what happened was Sammy talked to his other brother, which was I think he went by the name Cucaracha. Them 2 individuals were the first ones that started to really defect away from the Familianos and the organization, because even them, these were the individuals responsible for controlling the street regimen, heard all the complaints, reported them, and now they're getting word that their own carnales, their own brothers, are trying to replace them because they're not doing enough for the organization behind the walls. Only to make matters worse, there was a couple of NF associates, but they were just big-time dealers in Fresno who were working with Sammy, with Crackers. They actually had connections to a neighborhood in a territory that Black Bob, one of the NF generals, one of his territories. So they managed to overthrow that territory and another territory that belonged to Ezekiel Rabbit Lopez. So those two areas that got taken over by the F-14ers, and that we're talking about two different big cities, actually hurt the Eagles of the NFs in the back. So that only made things a lot more worse for the situation for the F-14ers, because these individuals, back in the day, I guess they were trying to portray that a lot of these F-14ers were big time dealers, man. That was their biggest profit, was the drug trade. So once Sammy and his brother started to defect, there was another individual that was appointed by the NF to take responsibility for the street regiments in Fresno. I believe his name was Frank Paco Pina. It's P-I-N-A. I don't know if I'm saying it like Pina, it's one of those last names. He's actually took control of the street regiment after Sammy was left, and he tried to get it back online. He tried to get everybody to, conform to the NF will and the NF Constitution, start paying the taxes, doing everything a street regiment's supposed to do. But by that time, it was already too late, man. It was a bad taste in everybody's mouth, and everybody was already defecting slowly but surely. But by this time, we're talking about the 80s. During the 80s, Bulldogs already became a faction of themselves. But they slowly were adopting the colors. They slowly adopted the mascot. They were just branching out and pulling away from Northern Structure that was still remaining on the yard. So in the 80s, we're talking about Northern Structure who were answering to the NF and were fulfilling NF will. Then you had all these defectors on the yard together who were slowly organizing and becoming their own faction, their own Fresno car. Now, mind you, Crackers was witness to all this. Now, Crackers never took credit for, like I said, creating the Bulldogs, but he had a strong voice in it because he didn't stop them. He didn't tell them no. But throughout all this time, as the F-14 started branching off and becoming Fresno Bulldogs and adopting the term Bulldogs, they actually did conform to Crackers about everything and got his stamp of approval. But like I said, Crackers never really outspoke it and said, hey, you know what? I created the Bulldogs. I gave the Bulldogs their names. He pretty much didn't stop it from happening. He let it happen. And I don't know why, because, like I said, when Crackers passed away, he still had the NF tattoo on him still. He still had that Mongolian. Maybe that was his badge of honor. Maybe that was his sense of pride that, he was this powerful individual. Because think about it, he's in the NF history as taking out Cheyenne Cadenas and one of the bodyguards. So I think, when he passed away, man, he left two legacies behind. One as a Familiano and one as one of the founders of the Bulldogs. And look what he did to his city of Fresno. Through his approval, through his stamp of approval, and through his voice and his leadership and his example to step away from the NF and become his own man. Like, I can't knock no Bulldogs, and I can't knock their nation for what they've done and what they believe in and how they're strong in their stance when it comes to independence and just being their own men. That's what everybody should be, their own man. Now, when Crackers actually finally fully made a pledge that he would never go back to the NF and he defected, he actually influenced his brother Shadow and Sparky and Indio. Sparky was one of the ones that actually played the biggest role in the creation of the Bulldog Nation. So you can see why the NF really hates the Bulldogs. If you can't see it, I'll explain it for you, because I believe they're a mirror image of what they done and what they did for themselves. The only problem is the Bulldogs didn't create a leadership. The Bulldogs didn't want no leadership. The Bulldogs actually learned from the NF's mistakes, the abuse, the bad leadership, and decided to say we're all going to be men standing on our own 2 feet, answering to nobody but together as one. It's a basic concept that, every organization should be following, instead of always creating these hierarchies that answer to the next man. This man answers to the next man. So now you can see why the NF hates them so much. But that's the hypocrisy and the contradiction that I find funny, is that the Familianos did the same thing to the Mexican Mafia. So now I understand why the Mexican Mafia for decades always hated the Familianos. Look what they did. They took a stance. They broke off, created their own name. Went to war. They both lost numbers throughout years of battle. And now they reached the peace treaty after 5 or 6 decades. So it's hard to answer my subscribers' questions like, will that ever happen with the Bulldogs and the Norteños and the NF? And I honestly think the NF won't ever allow it. But it's funny because in the Feds, BOP, California runs together. So, a Bulldog could be on the yard with a Familiano. They're just going to get along. But, they say the Familianos say that they tell the Bulldogs that they don't want to hear that Bulldog talk. as long as they keep that Bulldog talk to themselves, they can program with the Familianos. I don't know how true that is because I know I've been around a lot of Bulldogs. I know how Bulldogs think. I don't think a Bulldog will go for that, to be honest with you. And then after these years when, they said there was a couple of times, a couple of incidences occurred in New Folsom with the Bulldogs in the northern structure. Then the Bulldogs finally took over New Folsom during a big old melee that took place. Then you hear about this dude named Mousy Morales who came up and tried to create the Bulldog Nation, so on and so forth, with a couple other individuals. Then I wound up being suspended by his own kind. Overall, I'm just providing you with a general understanding of what took place and why you'll probably never ever see a peace treaty between the NF and the Bulldogs, the Norteños and the Bulldogs. And what's crazy is that the Norteños don't really have nothing to do with it. It's the Familianos hating the Bulldogs. It's just the Nuestra Familia is going to make these Norteños feel and believe that hate is necessary, that we cannot coexist with these individuals because they're detrimental to our program, they're detrimental to our yards, they're going to breach our safety and security. So it's pretty much a fight over the streets and yards against two big factions. So to answer your question, I honestly don't believe there'll ever be a peace treaty. But I just find it hypocritical that what the Bulldogs did and the stance that they made, just because they were Familianos, you'll never let them walk the yard. You'll never let them have the privilege of having their own yards, their own buildings, being able to do their time in their safe and secure environment, in their doghouse. But your whole cause and your struggle and your organization is based on the same concept that they stood for. All they did was suspend and dismiss the idea of leadership. Then you wonder why the Mexican Mafia always hated you guys for 5 or 6 decades and would never reason with you until this recent end of hostilities peace treaty. So you pretty much threw 5 or 6 decades of your life away because of what you did to another organization who hated you. But now you shook their hand. Why don't you shake their hand? But like I said, I'm pretty sure none of the Bulldogs are going to allow that to happen. They ain't going to stand for that. So that's the best I can answer your question to the best of my ability. I hope I made my point across, and thank you for asking me an honest question. So with that being said, like I always say, it's one life, one chance. When they got one chance to do this right, let's get it done. Peace.